it's a great opportunity now to just get people up to date on my thoughts about travel. This has been a lousy year for travel, to be honest, and we're all locked down. If you're like me, you probably miss traveling. It's not easy for me. I was walking home the other day and I saw a snail on my neighbor's fence, and all I could think was escargot. Well, I've been giving talks for a long time about travel, and I've given a talk which is my most important talk, I would say, and it's called Travel as a Political Act. And I've been thinking about travel as a political act along lines with COVID and what's going on now about travel when we can't travel. And I'd like to share with you, just for a few minutes, why we travel and why, when we're done with this pandemic, travel is going to be more important than ever. Now, I think what we want to remember is when we travel, it's our chance to get out there and explore, get out of our comfort zones and check out the world. That's what I've been doing all my adult life. Ever since I was a kid, I've been spending 100 days a year in Europe. And, India is my favorite country. But in my work, I teach Europe. And Europe is, to me, a springboard for world exploration. My mission in my company is to inspire Americans to venture beyond Orlando. And when we travel, I'm thinking of how can I travel and learn lessons from my experience and share them with others. I'm always over there making the mistakes, taking careful notes. When I get ripped off, I celebrate because they don't know who they just ripped off. I'm going to learn that scam and share it with others so they'll know what's going on. Europe is my beat, and I just love to spend time finding places like this. This is a little village on a hill called Civita di Bagnoregio. It's just 2 hours north of Rome. And these are the kind of places that I think will inspire Americans. There's three kinds of travelers. There's tourists, there's travelers, and there's pilgrims. And we can be a little bit of each. The tourist has just got a bucket list and they're going over for some fun. That's okay. The traveler is getting out of their comfort zone and learning things. And the pilgrim realizes that they can venture way far from home and actually learn more about themselves by looking at their home from a distance. And I like to inspire people to find a village like this on the Italian Riviera and be a little bit of all of them. Now, when we travel, we get close to nature. There's so many reasons to travel when we're thoughtfully traveling. Can you imagine being on top of a Swiss Alp, literally tight-roping on a ridge? On one side, you got lakes stretching all the way to Germany. On the other side, you got the most incredible alpine panorama. There it is, the Eiger, Monk, and Jungfrau. And ahead of you, you hear the long legato tones of an Alp horn, announcing that the helicopter-stocked mountain hut is open. It's just around the corner, and the coffee schnapps is on. You come home with a better appreciation for nature. When you travel, you also come home with a better appreciation of culture. I'm just sort of a cultural bumpkin here. When I grew up, cheese was no big deal. It was orange and the shape of the bread. Here you go, cheese sandwich. Then you go to Paris, you step into a cheese shop like this. It's a festival of mold. It's just that the cheesemonger sees you and he comes over and he goes, oh, here's an American I can turn on to the wonders of great cheese. He takes me over to the goat cheese corner, picks up a moldy wad of cheese, takes a deep whiff. Ooh, smell this cheese. It smells like the feet of angels. I give it a smell and it just smells like the feet of baseball players, whatever. But the great thing about travel is you realize some people get really excited about cheese. You don't have to, and you can. In fact, I get excited about cheese. Now that I'm home, I spend a lot of money on stinky cheese and I love it. And I'm thankful for that exposure. One of the great things about travel is you meet interesting people. I meet more interesting people in 2 weeks in Europe than I do in the rest of the year at home. They don't need to be earth-shaking encounters. It can sometimes just be fun. I was in Italy recently and this little kid was staring at me. It was kind of rude. Finally, his dad said, "Excuse my son. He stares at Americans." I said, "Well, why? What's with that?" He said, "Well, last week we were at McDonald's having our hamburger and my son, noticing the fluffy white bun, said, 'Dad, why do Americans have such soft bread?' And the dad said, 'Son, it's because Americans have no teeth.'" So the kid is all confused now and he stares at Americans traveling. I don't think the dad meant anything by that. It's just what dads do when they're out with the kids. They say nonsensical stuff to entertain themselves and confuse the kid. Well, I showed the kid my teeth and let him know that Americans do have teeth. But that's a silly example of an interesting point. There are major misunderstandings between cultures. And when we travel, we get to know each other. And that's a beautiful thing. A fundamental skill for being a good traveler is to be a cultural chameleon, to go local, to celebrate the local ways of doing things. I'm almost physically like a chameleon when I travel. I change. For me, chocolate's no big deal. I hear people say, oh, chocolate's to die for. Not at all, unless I'm in Belgium. And then chocolate is to die for. And I become an aficionado and I go to the finest gourmet chocolate shop and I get to know the hostess and I get to know the chocolate. It's a beautiful thing. When we travel, we want to become a temporary local. We become that cultural chameleon. If I'm with students in a little Italian university town, I'll drink what they're drinking, an Aperol Spritz. When I'm in England, a spot of tea feels just right. I don't hardly make a pot of tea in this hemisphere, but when I'm in England, I sure do. When I'm up in Scotland, it's whiskey. I've got a little flask of whiskey, and every night I enjoy a wee dram. If I'm in the Czech Republic, I don't drink wine. I drink the best beer in Europe. When I'm in Tuscany, I don't drink beer. I drink a full-bodied glass of red wine. In fact, I don't know a lot of Italian words, but I know three that are very important. Corposo vino rosso. A full-bodied glass of red wine. Make a point to be a cultural chameleon. When I work all day in Seattle and go home, I don't feel like a nice cloudy glass of ouzo. That would be almost inconceivable. But when I'm in Greece, I don't let a sunset go by without sitting down and enjoying that glass of ouzo. That makes your travels go better. Remember, when we travel, we find that people are into exciting challenges and there's all sorts of pride and dignity around the world. Turkey's a great place to check out that. Some of my favorite tour guiding has been to take Americans on a tour of Eastern Turkey, way over in the shadow of Mount Ararat. Not a lot of famous sites, but lots of cultural activities to check in on. I was with my Turkish tour guide once. We were tooling around looking for things, and we came upon a high school stadium filled with kids having some kind of a rally. Well, you park the bus and you step in. 200 high school kids thrusting their fist up into the sky and singing in unison, "We are a secular nation. We are a secular nation." I asked my guide, "What's going on? Don't they like God here?" And she said, "Oh no, we love God, but considering the rising tide of Islamic fundamentalism just over the border to our east in Iran, we're having a pep rally. We're very concerned about the fragile and precious separation of mosque and state. And these kids are having a pep rally for pluralism." And I thought, a pep rally for pluralism by Turkish teenagers in the shadow of Mount Ararat. That's fascinating. I would have never appreciated the complexity and the challenges and the exciting things happening beyond our borders if I hadn't traveled. Later on that same trip, we came to a village that I think had never seen another tourist. And we met the mayor and he took us on a tour of his town and he showed us the workshop of the most famous man in the town, the wood carver. Every village in that region wanted a prayer niche carved by this man. We gathered around his workshop and he did his work and suddenly he stopped and he held his chisel high into the sky and he declared, "A man and his chisel, the greatest factory on earth." Wow. I didn't need to teach that guy to get some computer literacy and go to night school. He was gratified. He was creating. He was contributing. Later on, I asked him if I could buy a piece of his carpet. He said, "No, for a man my age, to know that my work will go back to the United States and be appreciated, that's payment enough. Here, take this as a gift from me to you. And when you're back home, remember our little village." That's the beauty of travel. And that's the reason I like to travel. You know, I grew up thinking the world is a pyramid with the United States on top and everybody else trying to figure it out. And when I travel, I realize everybody doesn't have the American dream. I've got the American dream. You may have the American dream. That's fine and dandy. But these people here, they have the Sri Lankan dream. My Norwegian relatives, they have the Norwegian dream. My Bulgarian friends, they have the Bulgarian dream. And that is something to celebrate. Our world is a complicated place. It's a place with a lot of walls. And as a traveler, I'm committed to knowing that there's two narratives with every wall. And it's important for us to talk to people on both sides. In our travels, we have the opportunity to venture beyond our comfort zones. And in a lot of ways, I want to get to places that, frankly, my government would prefer I didn't go to. And I want to get to know the people there. We can go to Palestine. We can go to Cuba. We can go to Iran. You know, it's so important to get to know people who are supposed to be our enemies. When we travel to a place like Iran or Cuba or Palestine. It becomes tougher for their propaganda to demonize us because they know us as individuals. And when we fly home, it's tougher for our government to demonize them with our propaganda. This is a way that we can contribute to peace through our travels. I've had a lot of great experiences and great memories and great lessons from my travels. And I'd say the most important lessons I had were on my very first trip. I was visiting relatives in Oslo, in Norway. And I was with my parents. I was just 14 years old. And we were in the park behind the palace, Frogner Park, filled with these gorgeous statues. And I noticed as just a little 14-year-old knucklehead looking at my parents, and they were loving me so passionately, so unconditionally. They were contributing so much to my exposure to the world. And I looked up from there and I thought, wow, I'm just so blessed to have parents like this. And then I looked around the park and I saw it was speckled with other families, parents loving their kids as much as my parents loved me. And it hit me that this world is home to billions of equally precious children of God. That was an amazing revelation to me from my ethnocentric and my egocentric approach to life. Later on in that same trip, I was on the carpet in front of a TV in the home of my cousins in Oslo, and we were watching the moon landing, Neil Armstrong walking on the moon. And I was listening to the broadcast in Norwegian. I can still remember it. And lite skritte for menneskeheten, and a giant leap for mankind. And as a 14-year-old, I was thinking, my friends are back home waving little American flags. Yay, America. And I thought when I was in Norway enjoying that moon landing, it occurred to me, all of humanity was celebrating this. Of course, it was a great American triumph, but it was a human triumph. And we are a human family together. And these are the things that remind us that this world is a beautiful place. This world is filled with joy. It's filled with love. It's filled with beautiful families. And when we travel, we can appreciate that. It's more important than ever. I'd like to close with a lesson that I just love to share with my tour groups when I'm taking them as a tour guide around. I'm in Turkey, and I want my groups to know a dervish. I'll just paraphrase the situation, but it's just, to me, a lot of fun as a tour guide. I'm running around town. I got 20 tourists at the hotel looking for a dervish. I find a dervish, and I say, hi, I'm a tour guide from the United States. We have 20 tourists here. We'd love to watch you whirl. Can we do that? And he says, I'm not a photo op. I'm a monk. But if I can explain to you what I'm doing, you're welcome to watch me pray. I said, beautiful, when and where? On his rooftop, sundown. We gather. He comes out. Merhaba. He says, welcome. I am a dervish, what you Americans might call a monk. I follow the prophet Mevlana. I think you call him Rumi. He's the prophet of love, like your Saint Francis. Easy for everybody to get their brain around. And 5 times a day, I meditate by whirling into a meditative trance, and I think of the teaching of my prophet. I plant one foot in my hometown and my family. The other foot goes around in a circle, acknowledging and celebrating the diversity in God's great creation. With one hand, I go up and accept the love of our Heavenly Father. And with the other hand, it goes down like the spout on a teapot. And I whirl and I lose myself in that thought, the teaching of Mevlana, and I strive to become a conduit of God's love, doing his work here on earth. Watching him whirl, get into that trance. His head tilts over, his robe billows out. As a tour guide, I'm thinking, this is fantastic. I look over at my group and I see the wonder sweep over their face. And I know they're going to go home changed. They're going to go home a little less afraid, a little more open. And they're going to take with them what I think is the greatest souvenir. And that is a broader perspective. Now, when we travel, I think it's really important for us to remember that with COVID, we're entering a new age. I think it's the start of a new age. And it's an age where the challenges of the future will be different. Like COVID, these challenges will be blind to borders. They'll be impervious to conventional defense. They'll ignore our walls. To fight these challenges effectively, we need new weapons and we need allies. As we go forward, we need to embrace and employ science. We need to work with the family of nations. And rather than having a mindset of building walls, we need a mindset of building bridges. If we're going to tackle these challenges, we need to do it boldly, without fear. And I want to remind you, there's a lot of fear in our world lately. There's a lot of fear in our society lately. And as a traveler, I find that the flip side of fear is understanding. And we gain understanding when we travel. Fear is for people who don't get out much. So we will travel again. And when we do, for the reasons that I've just laid out today, travel will be more important than ever. And this is why, when we're through with this pandemic, we will have to travel and embrace the world. And then we'll all be better off for it. Thank you.